What's good, everyone? Welcome back to My First Kicks. This is a special episode I got in one of my favorite writers, current podcaster that I do enjoy listening. Some people have called me out that I don't listen to their stuff. It's fine. But I do listen to, Complex Sneaker podcast when I get a chance to. But welcome to the podcast, Matt Welty.
Wow, thanks. I feel like it's been a long time coming, and finally got out of my shell a little bit and came to Brooklyn and did a podcast.
Yeah, I bothered you a lot. Yeah. I feel like I did.
I don't know. It's nothing against you or anything. I just feel like I don't do like a lot of media sometimes. Mm-hmm. So it's, I feel like I'm always on camera, but I rarely get interviewed myself. So it's going to be interesting because I'm not used. I don't talk about myself often, even though I'll maybe tell tidbits on podcasts and stuff. But as far as like actually talking about myself, it's like sometimes I kind of like put up a wall sometimes. So I'm here to open up, I guess.
Yeah. Like you said, you do a lot of podcasts. And so it's hard for, when you are the host and you don't really get I'm pretty sure you get invited a lot to other podcasts, but like, I've been in that realm where for a whole year, nobody invited me. And then when I finally got into like somebody being like, hey, jump on, it was like really hard to turn off the host mentality. Cause you want to be like,
oh, you want to ask questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand.
I mean, look, you've had amazing guests. You've been in conversation with a lot of people and you told their stories, but now it's time to talk about yours. But we're just going to jump right into the question. And that question is, what's your first kicks? What's that first pair of sneakers you absolutely needed to have?
So I would say probably the first shoes, and I've told the story before that I really remember. It was second grade, 1993. I remember getting two pairs of shoes that year. The first pair for me that was like really impactful was OG Aqua Jordan 8s.
There you go.
Going to, I think maybe Foot Locker at the time. It was when you'd walk in and they had the shoe wall, but they had like those like round tables with the shoes that were like around them as well. If you see like those like shopping at, you'll see these videos of people going to Foot Lockers in the 90s and the layout of the store is much smaller and much different. And I remember picking the shoes up off of that. And I just remember like that print being like really attractive because I remember at the time it was like, not that I didn't know what the shoes were really. I knew these were like the Michael Jordan shoes. I remember watching the Bulls beat the Suns in the finals and being like, my life is changed by seeing this at the time. But also like I remember like
that's Charles Barkley.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
That era. Dan Marley, all them. Yeah. But I think I remember seeing like the Air Raid as well at the time when it kind of just had like that wild print.
Yeah.
On the heel and just being like, wow, those shoes like really catch my eye and seeing the Aqua 8s too. That was just like, wow, I need these sneakers. I remember getting those, cooking them. And at that time, it's like your feet grow so fast that it's like you can't really enjoy the shoes as much. And then I think I got three pairs of shoes that year, and which I guess was a big deal back then because I feel like you only got like two.
Shoot, I only got one.
Yeah,
so
I feel like you get one, but then sometimes your feet would grow, and then like you couldn't like wear them anymore. Yeah. So it was like by the time maybe like spring came around, and it's like okay, time for a new pair of shoes. But I remember for Christmas, I remember getting a pair of Reebok like black top pumps or like the outdoor ones. Being so hyped.
I'm hyped for you right now.
I felt like, that video of the kid opening up the Air Max 1s.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I remember just getting pumps because like a lot of kids in school had pumps, but they were like a status symbol. Right. Yeah. And I was like, wow, I want these. And I remember there was a lot of kids in my class. So when I was in elementary school, I was in this, early on, it was weird. It was like it was a first and second grade class, so I was like with older kids. So
it's like a accelerated program.
No. They just decided
they just put it together.
Yeah, for some of the students, they just.
Or is it the half and half class where it's like you get a TA that will teach?
No, it was one teacher.
It was one teacher.
Just one teacher, and then like maybe some of the older kids would do some of their lessons, and the younger kids do their lessons. They thought maybe you'd learn from them, but either way, there was a few like older kids in the class, and they had these fake pumps that were called jocks.
Oh my God.
And they were like trying to tell me that those were like,
these are the real ones.
These are the cool ones. Yeah. And I was like, wait, and I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mom, you got me these fake sneakers.
Yeah. No, I got the real pumps. And then I was just hyped to have the real ones because they were trying to tell me that theirs were the cool ones. But then I look back and I'm like, oh, that's funny. And I think I got a pair of like preseason pumps, like the Reebok preseasons, like with the turf on them.
Yeah.
I remember getting a pair of those and being hyped. But I think I remember the first time I got like flamed for shoes. I think my mom took me to this store called Ames, which is kind of like a Caldor or
I feel like I remember. It sounds familiar.
It was up in like in New England or like upstate New York. They had them, but kind of like a Kmart sort of like a department store, but like a lower budget one. And I remember getting a pair of Everlast sneakers, and people are like, that's not a sneaker brand. That's a punching bag. And I was like, oh man, they cooked me for having the Everlast.
You went into what is called the dark side, where it's like you're like, I couldn't get the pairs, but like you don't know, but it's like a brand and it looks cool. You're just like, I'm just gonna wear them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny like telling these stories like for myself because I feel like I always ask other people these stories, and you kind of like after a while you don't know what people are going to say, but all the stories kind of like common themes from it. And I remember early on, my mom was kind of like, the limit is $50 for a pair of shoes. She's like, anything you want above that, you're going to have to pay for it. And I'm like, I'm in 5th grade. Where am I going to get?
Where are you going to get money?
$40 or like, I don't know, it probably wasn't that much, but it was probably like another $30 to buy a pair of shoes that had like an Air Max bubble on them.
Yeah.
And you would just walk into the store into Foot Locker at that time. And if you saw like visible tech on the shoe, you just knew already it was like
already out of the price range.
Like, I think I remember seeing like, maybe like an early, like Barry Sanders, like the Zoom Turfs.
Man, you had some really good shoes.
I didn't have those
I'm
shoes.
just saying like in your area, like just being able to.
I feel like at that time, in the 90s, it was like you just went to like a sports store and they happened to have these shoes because people actually played sports in them. Later on, it was actually like growing up, originally from New Jersey, but then grew up in New Hampshire and then moved back to Jersey. But it was really hard to get good shoes up there because
like what part of New Jersey? Like, are you like more up?
I was I was in New Hampshire, and it was like I was like 45 minutes north of Boston, so I wasn't too far out. But in that like 2000s era, like during like the peak like streetwear era, there was one SB shop a couple of towns over called Identity, and I'd get like SBs from there. But as far as like Nike product that wasn't SB, the Foot Locker that I ended up working at early on, sorry, skipping around a little bit, but they wouldn't really carry like the retro product because Foot Locker at the time only deemed it like urban accounts could get it. So we were a suburban account and it wasn't a big mall. So it's like even Air Force Ones, Air Max 90s, stuff like that, I couldn't buy. We didn't have retro Jordans. Wow. So I could get SBs, but if I wanted to get anything that was like semi cool, I had to drive into Massachusetts. So I always felt like I was on like a hunt early on to get shoes. And SB was big for me because grew up skateboarding early on. One of the first shoes to me that like really meant a lot that my mom bought me, where she was just kind of like, okay, she finally like gave in because I think I was like a sophomore in high school, and she was like, I'll buy you like a cool pair of shoes. Yeah. And it was the Stevie Williams DCs, the first ones that looked like the Jordan 12s. Got them in navy with like a Carolina blue trim on them. And I just remember being like, I finally have like, because I had like the Jordans and stuff when I was young, but like I didn't really like, I look back on it and it's cool. But when you're like 8 years old, you kind of like don't really like process that like I have cool shoes at this point. But when you're like 15, 16 years old and you're like, I have a cool pair of shoes on my feet, and like I got a chain, had like the Stevie Williams on, you know what I mean? Like I felt like
the big DC shirt.
Yeah, I felt cool. You know, I had like an Echo shirt with like baggy like Carpenter, like Gap Carpenter jeans and like the Stevie Williams. And
you're like straight out of Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yeah. So yeah, getting those was huge for me. That's why when SB came about, I was like so about it, because I had like that skateboarding formation, you know. But then early on, I remember like, cause my grandparents lived in Jersey and I'd go down to visit them in the summertime. My mom would be like, well, if you want to buy your school shoes, I'm like, I want to buy school shoes. Like when I like come down here, I do not want to buy school shoes in New Hampshire because they're getting all the wax stuff, you know, but I would go down there and I remember like, this is like 2002, 2003 and like getting, the Adidas Pro Shells, the mid top with the strap on it, the shell toes with the strap.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I would like, this is like 2000, so I would like rock it with like baggy like the cargo sweats, and like have like the not strap it, like have like the strap hanging off to the side, you know, and just thought I was like with the tongue kind of like puffed out a little bit, and just thought,
super Chad Muska style,
kind of, yeah. But I thought it was like super
straight out of Shorty's video.
Yeah, so like, you know, got those, and that really kind of like that kind of got me like a little more into sneakers, where I started like going to stores a little bit and being like, hey, what do you have here?
Right. Yeah.
Or like when I'd go down, like what cool shoes can I get? And then I remember getting SBs, and then like,
oh, so this is before SBs.
Yeah. Sorry. This is high school. Okay. And then like a little bit after that, I ended up like getting into SBs, like right after high school.
Was there a community around that like skate shop that was like ushering? Because I felt like, I mean, you know, the history of SB, we share that in common of like, in the beginning, skaters were super hesitant of being like, oh my God, it's big.
Well, I remember at first, like, because I had a subscription to Thrasher magazine, and the SB ads were like always in the back, right? And I remember seeing it at first and being kind of like, Nike? Like, really? Like Nike? But...
So you didn't have a brand loyalist to Nike in the beginning?
No, not at all. Because like most skaters, like I was into like DC, but not DC how people think about it when they're thinking about like PacSun, metal militia guys. It was like, no. Like DC, like Josh Kalis, Love Park, Philadelphia, like hip hop DC. So I was like into that. And, but then when I saw SB come around, I was like, wait, but I like all these skaters. That was what got me. And I know that they said it's always like the marketing scheme, but I'm like, I love Richard Mulder. I love Gino. Like, I love Reese.
And Brian Anderson,
or Danny Supa. I loved all those guys. So it was like, okay, this is kind of cool. It's just interesting. I didn't get the shoes early on because it was like, I couldn't even like find the early SB stuff.
Right, yeah.
But then just kind of dabbled in getting into like Adidas and Nike and whatnot, and then finally getting SBs. And then that's when I like found Nike Talk and everything. And then that's when the world just kind of like opened up for me. It's like the 2000, like mid 2000s, Lupe, Pharrell, Kanye era of like streetwear. And I'm just like, I didn't know at the time, because I was like, am I supposed to, is this like the look I'm supposed to be into? I was like kind of like hesitant about it, you know? And I'm like, no, this is cool.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people around me weren't into it. You know, you went to the skate shop and people were into it, but I was like, wait, I don't think at that point it was like people didn't collect sneakers.
No, yeah.
Especially being in like the suburbs, it was like people didn't collect shoes.
Right. People didn't really collect. Like it would be like figures and stuff like that here and there. Yeah. But there was like this weird boom that happened in the later 2000s where it became a thing, you know?
But then I remember like, I think I had bought in like 6 pairs of shoes in like 2 months or something like that. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, you know, maybe like this is like a thing for me. And then I started like traveling into Boston with like friends and going to Bodega and Concepts. And
what was your, like, Bodega is such a cool spot. What was your first reaction?
Well, it was cool because one of my best friends at the time, this guy, Dave, I kind of like got him into shoes a little bit as well, but he was going to college in Boston at the time. And I was just working it right outside of it, but like being not too far. So I could like come down for like the weekend and he knew like where everything was. And he would kind of like take me around to all the spots. So it was kind of like, I didn't really discover it where I was like, hey, what is this? He was kind of like, hey, we're going to go to Bodega. And I'm like, oh, I've heard about it. You know, I really want to go.
Yeah.
And just being super hyped super hyped on it.
Did they have that speakeasy element in the beginning?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was always like that.
The machine.
And we used to go to Concepts when Concepts was in the back of the tannery, because that was like the original store that like it was part of, and it wasn't like Concepts how people end up knowing it now, you know, or it was like different iterations, but it was just like cool sneakers in the back of like an actual footwear store.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh wow, this is like
that's the Kith in the back of Atrium.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was like we always had to go to Massachusetts and Boston because couldn't get retros there. And then, you know, I worked at Dick's Sporting Goods in the footwear department around the time that I got into all this, and all those people were like, dude, you're into sneakers? I'm like, dude, I work with you. We work in a sneaker. Like, we didn't work in a sneaker store. Like, I worked in the sneaker department, but like working at Dick's, just like you're working at like, it felt like you're working at like Bass Pro Shop, you know? And people are like, they're like giving you like weird looks for like being into shoes, you know? Like, this is like super like Nike Shox era, you know? And I feel like people always laugh at me because I like always like trash Nike Shox, but if like, so I've always said in certain communities, Nike Shox were cool, right? If you go
out here, they were pretty cool.
You go to Harlem, Brooklyn, etc., Nike Shox are cool.
Yeah.
If you go to the suburbs, Nike Shox are like a bro shoe.
Really?
You know? Yeah. It's like cargo shorts, playing beer pong with like cooking. Like Nike.
I can't even see that. For some reason in my brain, I'm picturing bros in Martine Roses, but it's obviously the wrong picture. No. I know the silver ones.
Shox Turbo. Yeah. So it was always like,
or the Vince Carters.
Yeah, but being into like sneakers made me feel like different, you know? I went to school.
Did you go to school for like journalism or anything?
Yeah, originally I wanted to be like an English major, and then I was like super bad at high school. Had to like go to a bunch of schools just to get into school, and then went there for like in like Western New Hampshire near Vermont for like a year and a half, and I was like, I hate this. I'm around. There was one skate shop in town that had SBs, and I remember buying one pair of the Paul Ehrlich dunks. Urich.
Yeah. The highs with the stripes on the back.
I got those there, but then people looked at me like crazy. It was only like the dudes on the basketball team they like peep my shoes and be like, okay, you know, like you're cool. But everyone else on campus was like,
look at this weird guy.
Yeah, they weren't into it. You know, this is like 2007. They just look at me like an alien for wearing like bright shoes. You know,
that was I think in 2007, because it's also around when I was going to college, and I was wearing the same crazy stuff too. And people would be like, "Man, your shoes are so loud." And you know, you fast forward to just for this, like now, you know, we rarely see people wearing flashy colors, but then everybody's into sneakers.
Yeah. And then I was like, I hated that. And I wanted money because I wanted to buy shoes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I dropped out of school, went back. I had a summer job at Foot Locker. And I was like, they're like, yeah, we'll like accelerate you to like assistant manager. I'm like, cool. You know, sign me up.
How'd you do that?
Yeah. So I got that, you know, I ended up getting transferred. I ended up working in a mall near Boston. So like everything kind of like fell into place with like sneakers. But then I was like, I hate my life right now. Like,
no way.
Well, like working retail, I just like hated it. You know, like some people like romanticize like working in a sneaker store, and I guess it's cool to some extent. But when you're working like 55 hours a week in a Foot Locker in a mall,
and most of the time you're just standing around,
and you're like not making a lot of money. Yeah, you're just like, man, I'm just like wasting away. Yeah, you know, so.
Retail is not easy, but shout out to all the people who
no, for sure. I mean, I've learned, I worked sneaker retail for like 8 years, you know, but more than that, like almost like a decade, I worked like sneaker retail. So,
I mean, I worked candy retail. I worked candy retail for 6 years. Yeah. And I was just like, I don't know if you've ever been to Dylan's Candy Bar, but
I've heard, that's like Ralph Lauren's daughter.
Yeah. Shout out Dylan. She's the homie. But like, she like the standing around and doing retail and, you know, super customer service and stuff like that. There is always a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. I just hated it, man. Like working like Christmas time and people just being miserable. And this was during the whole like economy recession. Yeah. So I remember like a lot of the Jordans were coming out and they weren't. This is when they had like paused kind of on like a lot of Jordan retro releases because they were doing the countdown packs.
Yes. Yeah. I was just
so they did the countdown packs, but then like after that for like almost like a year, they like didn't have like any one-off like retro product.
I thought didn't they streamline it down to like 4 a year at one point?
I forget, but it was like, I remember this was the time when they had like re-released the black and Carolina blue or University blue 12s.
Yeah.
That was like one of the first ones that they had brought back as like a standalone retro. And I think they also did like the Olympic 7s came back, the For Love of the Game with like the with the heart on the heel.
Yeah.
And then they like did all the 12s. It was like the flu games, the white and red, and then like the 6s that weren't the infrared 6s, the black and red and the white and red. But it was like that era of like working there and like the shoes like going on sale and just being in the store and like you thought retros were going to sell out. You're like, oh, I finally work at a store that has all like the good releases. And then like nobody came to buy them because no one had any money. And that's when I like was like, hey, I'm out. And I moved back to New Jersey, went to Rutgers, got a journalism degree, but still worked at Foot Locker. And and then everything kind of like got an internship at Complex. Yeah. Everything kind of like
now you're here. The way that like, I mean, the transition of like, it seems like the path is like kind of just building out, right?
But I've thought about this a lot recently and like, just like me and like my personal beliefs in the world. I don't really think like anything happens by coincidence. Right. And it's just crazy that this was never something I ever planned for. I was just living life, doing all this sneaker stuff because it was something that I liked. Yeah. And I needed a job. My parents would have killed me if I just sat at home and didn't have a job, you know? So I was just out there working at sneaker stores. And I don't know, I was just reading like Hypebeast and High Snobiety and Complex and just being like, oh, blogs are cool. You know, and people didn't really know what blogs were in like 2009. And going to like underground hip hop shows and skateboarding and doing all this stuff. And I never had like any sort of idea that partaking in all of this would kind of like actually be like my real
job.
Or no, my real, like that was like my education.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like your life learned like experiences.
All of that stuff is kind of what taught me how to do what I'm doing now. And like, obviously I'm very thankful I have like a journalism degree and I feel like that helped me put the pieces into place. Yeah. Or like the framework around like what I knew. Because without that, I think I would just know all this stuff and not how to like
hone the skill or like hone it and put it together so that it can make one, I don't know, you.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you talked about, you know, the SBs and finding Nike Talk, you know, back in that day, I was an nsb.org person. I feel like I mentioned it to you before. And for me, Nike Talk was like, I'll kind of jump on there and then I'll read everything. I'm more of a lurker on there, but nsb.org, everybody knew who I was at that point.
Oh, wow.
So, Nike Talk, right? Everybody fantasizes Nike Talk and be like, you had to be there, blah, blah, blah. But like, what was Nike Talk for you? Like, what is when you look back at Nike Talk, what does it look to you?
Well, I remember, for me, the first thing that I went to Nike Talk for was the What Did You Wear Today forum. To me, that was just so interesting to see like all these people at the time. I wasn't like embarrassed by my sneakers, but you know, I had like 15 or 20 like cool pairs of shoes, but I didn't have any like crazy heat. You know what I mean? Like I got into SBs, but I wasn't one of those people that, and I can admit I knew what it was back then, but I wasn't like buying SBs in 2003. Right. Like I didn't have a pair of Heinekens and Tiffany Dunks just sitting in my closet. And I saw all these people who had like crazy heat, just like breaking it out. And also they had like, a lot of those people early on had like the actual real like cameras and stuff. Yeah. And I just had like a digital camera in like my dorm room and I'd be like, okay, you know, and it's like, well, no, these guys have like
the Sony one shot or whatever, the pixel shot, whatever, with the sliding.
I forget
front.
What it was. You had to like, and you had to, you know, plug it into your laptop and like, get all the photos off of it, you know, but I saw all that and I'm like, wow, I don't even want to post on here because these dudes are like
Yeah, they're going crazy.
Yeah, they're like the real collectors, you know? And then there'd be people like Dom Kennedy was posting on, I know people always say, oh, Dom Kennedy's posting on Nike Talk, but I really remember like him posting his fits on the What Did You Wear Today thread. Yeah. And I remember then he drops his first mixtape, 25th Hour. And I just remember walking around campus in Western New Hampshire and just listening to it and thinking that like, this is everything that I'm feeling and want in my life right now. And then I look around me and then just see like bros and like cook shoes in frat basements, you know, and girls in fried Uggs. And I'm just like, this is not like the life that I'm envisioning for myself. Yeah. So then I was like, I need to get out of here. That was kind of like the
like turn of the light bulb moment.
Yeah. And I don't want to say like Nike Talk convinced me to drop out of school. And I'm not saying like, oh, drop out of school. It's super cool, you know, but I guess it worked out for me. I ended up going back to school. So it's not.
No, yeah. I mean, look, when I first went into school, I thought I was going to be a video game designer. I worked at GameStop. It was like, this is what it is. Yeah. Figure out you need to know math. Yeah. And I am terrible at math. Oh. So I was just like, nope. So I switched to graphic design and now I'm here. I'm working in advertising. Yeah. But the like, you have to take those chances. I feel like a lot of people don't really take those chances and they get stuck, you know?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was just like, hey, I'm going to apply to one school. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to apply to Rutgers. And that was it, you know, because I just want to go back to Jersey. And I was like, I want to go to a big university. So I applied to the one school and I got in and I was like, wow, okay, I guess I'm doing this, you know? And then I ended hitting up the store down there and working down there. And then I ended up, that was that whole like menswear era. Cause this is like 2010 when like guys started getting into like selvage denim and
oh man, I remember that
chambray shirts and like Red Wing boots. So I was kind of like into that at the time.
That came back recently in 2015. I feel like closer to 2020.
I feel like there was like a point where like people were like, hey, I'm thinking about this again, you know? But I remember like I was taking a journalism class and this is why it's funny. I say like, you know, all these things lining up, just the odds of these things happening. It's like, what's the chance of this, you know? Right. And then I'm in journalism class and I meet this one guy. I was wearing like menswear stuff, but he was, you know, into that stuff too. And he was like, oh, hey, what's up? My name's Matt. And I'm like, hey, what's up? And he had worked at Madberry Club, right? And he's like, oh, you know, we're thinking of bringing people on. And I was like, okay, cool. And then he was like, hey, you know, we don't actually have any like space or whatever. We're actually not bringing more people on. But there's this other blog that I know called 2 Inch Cuffs, which was like a menswear e-commerce site at the time. And he's like, you should check them out. And I was like, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like I genuinely appreciate it. And they just happened to be like hiring a copywriter at the time. And we launched the e-commerce site, you know, and the stuff that the lookbooks that we did ended up getting posted on Complex.
Oh,
right. That was funny. That was such a weird like moment. We're doing like menswear, going to these trade shows and like we did a bag collab, like a tote bag collab with Kyle from Brain Dead.
Oh wow. Okay.
With his brand Farm Tactics, like early on. You know, and then we were met like public school at like at a trade show and they wanted to do like a denim collab with us when they first started. It was so weird to like be just like this.
You're like was in the ground level of like when this first was like starting to bubble up.
It was just weird, you know. And I was just like an intern, like just hoping to like meet someone who would give me a job at these events, you know. But then you know they were like, hey, I graduated school, and then I had asked the guy Ruben who ran the website. I was like, do you know what? He hooked me up with someone at Complex, and he's like, oh, I know Gian De Leon, who was the style editor at the time, or one of them. And he was like, hit him up, and I hit him up, and he's like, hey, yeah, we're looking for interns. And I like, yeah, I'll give you an interview.
Did you make the move immediately? Like, how did you? Because you're an intern, you're not getting paid. So
well, I was just happy I got like an interview, you know, and I like went to the city and like. They were actually more, I told them I'd worked for 2 Inch Cuffs and I thought that was just going to be like what got me in. But they looked at my resume and they were like, wait, you've worked at like sneaker stores for like 8 years. And I was like, yeah. And they were like more interested in the fact that I worked at all these sneaker stores than me doing stuff for a menswear site at the time, which I thought it was like, I thought the sneaker stuff was like in the past, you know? So then I'm there and I'm writing style stuff for Complex, just doing blog posts and whatnot. This was like during the whole like Pyrex, Givenchy, Rottweiler,
Hood by Air,
On Noir, leather pants, like that whole era. And then at the same time, it was Nick Engvall and Russ Benson. They were doing the sneaker stuff.
Shout out, former guest.
Yeah, shout out. Thanks for both of them for everything, obviously, that they've helped me with over my career. But they were like, "Oh, you know shoes too?" I'm like, "Yeah, I really know sneakers." And they were like, "Oh, do you want to like write some blog posts for us on like the weekend or like in the morning?" I think it was in the morning. They wanted me to just do like 2 blog posts at like 8 a.m. And I was like, "Sure." I get paid extra money. I was just like making not a lot of money, just being a freelance intern, whatever, getting paid whatever a post, right? And I'm like, "Sure, I'll do that." And then I started doing the sneaker stuff a lot, and I started doing more style stuff too, but I started getting like my more like, not like well known, but people started to recognize my work around like the office and whatnot. And
I mean, I remember reading your work super early on because I was a big Complex. I got grandfather in through Mark Echo because I was a huge Mark Echo fan. Shout out Mark. And it's funny because I was such a diehard. I remember when he dropped Getting Up. And like he answered one of my questions on IGN. And then that's how I was able to go to Virgin Records and get everybody to sign my Getting Up limited edition.
The first time I saw him, I was like, I forgot the password to get into the old Complex office on 23rd Street by Home Depot. And I was like expecting someone to let me in, and like Mark Echo walks in the door, and he looks me up and down, and he's like, "Who are you here for?" And he just looks at me and he goes, "Don't steal any shit," because someone had just stolen like a cause something.
That's crazy.
And it was the real, like, it felt like this is my like Devil's Wears Prada moment, of like the Mark Echo being mean to you.
Now you just have Mark Echo in the back of your head being like, "Don't steal anything."
We had him on the Complex Sneaker Show, and then I've told him that, but they were like, I ended up getting hired as like a sneaker editorial assistant, not style. I thought it was always going to be style, and they're being sneakers. So then I'm working there. I
mean, you get fits off. You still get fits off.
Maybe it's not really like I like clothes to some extent, but I don't really worry about it too much. But I ended up working with, I think Nick maybe had just left. Nick Engvall had just left, and it was Russ, and then Gerald Flores gets hired, and then we were just doing Complex Sneakers, and I did Complex Sneakers stuff for a handful of years after that, and then got known more as like a writer. Started doing a lot of work that people noticed, which was cool. It was a cool feeling, but it was just being a writer on the internet. And
to highlight like your writing style. I think that, and I think I bigged it up recently with the CrossFit article, where I like when you take aspects of your personal interest and you put it into the actual writings. Like, I feel like that is missing a lot currently. It's always just like, the shoe is out. Bah, here you go. The shoe is coming out. Here you go.
Yeah. I mean, I was always a balance. Like I always have to write about the hype stuff to some degree, because that's what's going to pay the bills. Like I can't not talk about Travis Scott Air Jordans. And like people, even if I don't care for it, I feel like people still want to get my opinion and my co-host opinion on what's popular right now. And I feel like we kind of serve as people.
No, the balance is there. I think you still, even with the hype stuff, you still talk about, the importance of the shoe instead of just being it like, or the importance of the collaboration, or the importance of you add in the extra context where it's like, Private Selection just posts a picture and goes, "Hey, this is the sneaker." Like that's what sneaker journalism has become, or that's what it is.
I think a lot of sneaker journalism is just kind of like plug and chug, like just kind of like just get the info out there. And obviously that stuff's needed because a lot of people are just like, when is the shoe coming out? And they just want that. They don't really want to read. And for me, I was like, I have a journalism degree, and I'm like, I want to write long stories and have people read about them. And I think I remember ended up writing a story on Sneaker YouTube, and this was like people still go back to this story and they get so upset about it. And like, I had interviewed like everyone who was popping at the time in sneaker YouTube.
This is like Bullet.
I didn't talk to him. Sorry, so it wasn't everyone.
Okay.
But and that's not. Like
I was just saying, just that era.
It was like Kais.
Yeah.
Jacques.
Yeah.
Fomer Simpson.
Yeah.
Hess Kicks. I forget who else, but it was like a handful of like the big names of people in the space. And I was kind of like, why is sneaker YouTube obsessed with clickbait? And this was the super clickbait era of like, I found Yeezys at Payless, you know, and it's like, no, you didn't.
You brought them.
And then Full Size Run had started. It was a new like live stream show. And it was just Brendan and Rich Lopez. And they just wanted me to come on to talk about the article that I wrote about sneaker YouTube, like a guest segment. And I didn't think much about it. And then I think one day, this is 2017, one day, one of them was on vacation. I think maybe Brendan was on vacation. I don't remember, but they were just like, hey, do you want to fill in? And I was like, sure. And then I never thought I'd be one of those on camera people, because early on at Complex, you look at like, the early like Complex News people. I know there's like that meme going around, just like dog. Like it was like Sean Evans, Jinx, Emily Oberg, Tamra Dia, Speedy. It was just all dogs, right? So I never thought, like looking at them being so good at what they did, that I would be like that person. And I still don't think of myself as that buttoned up, like polished on camera person, but they were like, hey, do you want to be a host? I mean, do you want to just step in? And someone internally was like, we just like that you have a different opinion. We may not necessarily agree with your opinion, but we like you have a different opinion. And they were like, well, what if we put the three of you together and the three of you start arguing? Right. And this was, I think, right around the time when they were launching Everyday Struggle.
Right. Yeah.
Like Full Size Run came before Everyday Struggle, but it was right around the same time where they had just started.
That like little YouTube series, like they were doing a bunch, like you had Life at Complex, you had Everyday Struggle with Joe Buttons,
but they wanted like that like Everyday Struggle dynamic of like us arguing about shoes. And then, you know, it just started off in this like little like back end studio, and then they put us in a new studio, and then like we ended up getting like real guests, not to like disrespect anyone who was early on, but it was just kind of like, hey, our friend, you know, you have a sneaker store, you want to come on? You know, it was like early on, it was like that. But then it was like, I think like one of the first people was like, we had Conceited on, and then we had John Geiger on, you know, and Emily Oberg came on as a guest and whatnot. So it was like, okay, it's starting to get like a little more steam. And then you're like, oh crap, we did like 100,000 views on YouTube, you know? And then I remember I get a DM from Trinidad James, and he's like, hey Chief, how do I get on this show? You know, like something like, I heard you guys were popping, how do I get on the show? Cause I think he was friends with Conceited, and Conceited told him about the show. And like someone hit me up. No. And then I had to hit up everyone and be like, hey, kind of random, but like Trinidad James wants to be on the show. And this is 2018. And obviously everyone knew he was a huge sneakerhead. He was doing the Camp James stuff. And like, but at that point of his career, he was kind of like in a transition phase of like he was doing a little more acting at the time. And so we're like, hey, what is he up to? We didn't really know what he was up to in his career. So they're like, yeah, sure. Sure, let's have him on.
Give him a chance.
And we had him on as a guest. And I remember like Joe LaPuma hitting me up and being like, yo, Trinidad is awesome on this. Like maybe you guys can have him on as like a recurring guest, you know, at the time, because we didn't think much. And then Rich ends up leaving. He got a job somewhere else. So we needed a new co-host. And we put out like a casting call being like, hey, we need a third host of Full Size Run. And then Trinidad hit me up or sent me a text. Actually, I remember going to lunch with him after the show. The first time we did it, went to Shake Shack together. And that's right when Everyday Struggle started to take off. And you kind of saw like Joe Budden, who used to be an artist, but now he was getting into the podcasting lane. And I think he kind of saw like, okay, not that he still didn't make music, but he had his music career. Like what's the next...
What's the pivot?
Yeah, what's the pivot? And he's like, well, maybe this might be the pivot for me, you know? So we just talked about it and I didn't think much of it, you know? And then he hits me up and he's like, hey, Chief, you need to You need a
third?
Yeah. And I was like, hey, Trinidad James wants to be the co-host of the show. And then people at the company are like, oh, that's interesting. You know? And they talk about it. And like, we had to hold a whole like audition of people just to say that we had like,
of course, it's like hiring seasonal workers.
Yeah. Like, we had to like, we interviewed like 10 people, you know, but we had people fly in for it and whatnot. But I think in the back of our head, we kind of knew that like Trinidad was like the right.
You already have the proven concept that
he was
like
the right
chemistry
fit,
is there. Yeah.
You know, the name recognition, him being like a huge sneakerhead. It just kind of was like, why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And it like diversified like the show and like where we all come from and our humor and our taste on things. So then he ended up doing it. And then Full Size Run was Full Size Run for like 7 years. You know?
I definitely think that show made you and Brendan revered in sneaker community. And I mean, we talked about this before air, but like, I think it brings this like status within sneaker community that people are looking for your approval or your guys' approvals here and there. I mean, even with the fit segment, what was it called?
Drip Flipper Skip?
No. The one where people submit their that. So it's just like, you know, I feel like, I mean, in sneaker culture and sneaker communities, I always feel like there's going to be infighting regardless. For
sure. And I mean, it was never the intention. I mean, maybe to some extent, but like, for sometimes it was a spicy show, you know, there were like spicy moments of it. So like things would go viral early on sneaker YouTube, you know, and it was fun. You know, I got to interview a lot of big name people.
Yeah.
Have a lot of memories.
Is still Tom Segura's episode.
Really? The remote one?
The remote one, only because of the Drip Flipper Skip and the KDs. That shit.
And then Trinidad ended up like
he sent them 2 pairs.
Yeah.
That shit is so funny to me.
And then that was funny too, because it's just so the way things work. And then because Tom's friends with Bert. And then we had Bert on Full Size Run. And then I didn't realize how cool him and Trinidad were. So I walk on and I'm like, I wasn't expecting them to be like the buddy cop like show that like in your head you're like, okay, Trinidad James and Bert Kreischer are like best friends. Okay, this is cool.
So I'm like in their universe, whatever.
Yeah, but I remember he takes his shirt off, and I think he like chugged a beer out of a shoe.
Yeah, he does what's it called?
Shoey.
Shoey, Shoey. I'm like, he's just too much. He's too much. He's a ball of charisma, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, really like blessed that I got to do that. You know, I've like been able to like travel the world because of it, and it's just so crazy like meeting people in Malaysia, Philippines.
I know. I wanted to bring that up, like
Dubai, and it's like just meeting people who are like, who know who I am. That's like really nuts to me, man. Like I've been able to like do all these experiences and like people know who I am, but I like don't think of myself as like a celebrity in any sense because I just feel like I'm a regular person. I'm not saying that to be humble. I just don't view myself that way. But to like go places internationally and that people like recognize you, I'm just like, wow, this is so weird.
Maybe the next Complex Con Hong Kong, you're gonna have like a Szechuan chicken named after you or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just I'm just
steamed
like
vegetables.
Yeah, just like really like grateful that like had the opportunity through that, and it was all like doing something that we loved. It wasn't like this like manufactured thing that you know was fake or inauthentic. Like just going back and telling the story about how it all occurred.
Right.
It's just like everything like aligned for this to happen. It wasn't like someone sat down in a boardroom and was like, how are we going to make a cool sneaker talk show? And I think that's why it worked.
Right.
Because
it's organic. It organically came together.
Like I was never supposed to be on the show. And then I came on the show. Trinidad was never supposed to be on the show. And then Trinidad comes on the show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and even the times when it was like, times where like Trinidad's schedule didn't work and we had like Conceited as a guest host, but we had Conceited early on and he's like a friend of ours, you know, and it just kind of like all like meshed, you know?
Because I mean, your career is very long and now, you know, with the end of Full Size Run and, you know, you doing complex cons now and stuff like that. I'm curious, like, cause you talked about, you took a chance this past week of looking over your career and looking over how far you've come. But where do you ever get a chance to celebrate your own wins?
it only hits me like when we like sit down and talk about it sometimes. I like being like I'm like a regular person, and I kind of like take myself out of, I'm not like in, I feel like if you're in New York and into sneakers, and especially if like people know you on the internet, it's really easy if I wanted to like go hang out in Soho and kind of like go around Kith and Flight Club and kind of like yak it up. You know what I mean? Like, I could do that. Right. But I'm not that person at all. Like I just stay in New Jersey, work out.
I wanted to bring up CrossFit too.
Yeah. I work out, go to church. Like I just like live my life kind of like separate from, not that I'm not into sneakers, but I very early on kind of had to like draw a line and be like, I love sneakers. This is my life, but this is like my career over here. And then I need a life outside of it. Cause if I don't, I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah.
And that's where I really had to like build out something for myself, you know?
That is interesting because like I've been recently, I guess, reaping that, like where I would go out and people are like, oh snap, get this 2 shots. But like, and I'm very like, cause then now I have to create 3 different lives. Right.
Yeah.
For me, I work and then from then it's basically this podcast and the stuff outside that are my interest. And to be able to like, okay, now where do I make the interest, the work part? And then I can, you know, have that like, all right, I get to work out and just not have to think about like, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. You need like that, some sort of like stress relief. You know what I mean? For like me, for the longest time was like going to like New York Red Bull games. And then that kind of like played into the whole sneaker thing. Cause then I got like, that was like early on full size run. And I was wearing all the Adidas and Stone Island. And you know, that was like a whole thing, but that was also like something like just part of my life, you know? And I had like a lot of opportunities through that as well. And, you know, I'm just, I don't know. I just feel like all those things just kind of like oddly just added up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I do hope you take, you know, hopefully this podcast helps you.
No, trust me. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not like one of those like 24/7 workaholic people. Like I always joke, I'm like Joe and Brendan are like, not that I take it easy, but to me, they're like way more like workaholic, like personalities to some extent. And for me, it's like, man, I don't even check work stuff till I get in the office.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one.
Like I do not. And like some people wake up and like check their email. No. I go work out, pray, eat breakfast, and then go to work. And then all of a sudden I'm like tapped in, but I really need that like space in between the two because I've been in the shoes for so long that it's obviously part of my life.
Right. Yeah.
For this, but I'm like, I can't obsess about it 24/7. And I feel like sometimes that's why I like, you know, people laugh about it. I get into it with people online because some people like, I'm thankful that people take sneakers really seriously because if they didn't, I wouldn't have a career.
Yeah.
But I feel like some people take sneakers like a little too seriously and like they let sneakers dictate their emotions. And if you're getting angry about sneakers and letting it affect your mood, then you really need to like reevaluate what you're doing. You know, we can't let sneakers make us mad at people we don't know on the internet to where it like wrecks our day. Because then you go home and then like maybe you're like a jerk to your parents or your girlfriend, and you know, just because you argued with someone on Twitter, like I feel like that's not really worth it.
No, it's not. I mean, especially during the pandemic when everybody's like, oh, I lost again on this on this drop. I lost again. And even now with like recent drops, or you know, people were complaining about the poly lows dropping, and then they closed the pre-order after 5 hours, and then people are like, I can't believe it. And I'm just like, listen, it's fine. There's gonna be another shoe. Like you just got to move on to the next one. And I don't know where the passion, like that style of passion, came from, because even when I was younger,
it wasn't the same.
It wasn't like
you might have been a little upset. But you're like, hey, you know what? Another shoe's going to come out. And the shoe that you're angry about not getting, you're probably going to forget about it in like 3 months time. And like, trust me, I get that people are going to call me a hypocrite because they're like, oh, people send you shoes, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. Trust me. But I also bought shoes for, 10, 12 years before that, and like worked to a place where it's always like crazy when people tell you like, oh, it must be nice. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, it's not like I didn't work 20 years to get to this position. And the end game was never to get people to send me shoes. It's just like a benefit of like putting in all this work within the sneaker community and space, and trying to give back to maybe like a younger version of myself who is out there, who wants to like dig into an interview with Ronnie Feig that I'm doing with him, where like now they're learning something about shoes because I can be like the messenger for it. That's kind of like my goal, I hope. Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like you're doing perfectly with that. Every time you get sneakers, I'm always like, congrats. So I think it's the way that social media has painted seeding. Right.
I've given away more shoes than I own. And I'm not like trying to say that to like, that makes me a good person. No, but like, you know what? I actually get, sometimes there's like some stuff that I get, of course, I'm going to be like thankful for and I want to keep, right? Like J Tips, great dude, sends me his Sauconys, right? I'm not going to like give those away because I'm like thankful that like a friend of mine got to make a shoe and he gave it to me, and I appreciate it on that level. And clothing. They're one of the first people I interviewed when I first started working at Complex, when they did the burger shoe, the burger Sauconys, and I had the exclusive interview on that, and I have like a relationship with them throughout the years. Action Bronson, got to know him throughout all the years. He sends me a shoe. I'm super thankful for it, and it's like sometimes people send you stuff and you're like thankful that you get it, but maybe it's just not for you, or you're like, hey, you know what? I have 300 pairs of shoes. I don't need everything. Hey, there's someone else in the office who doesn't get a lot of shoes, or there's homeless people outside, or there's someone at the gym, or, someone at the gym has a son who needs shoes for back to school. I get so much more gratification being able to like take the things that I feel like I've been given and blessed with and share them with other people than I do just being like, how many cool shoes I have in my collection. I don't know. That's just like,
no, I feel you on that 100%. I think more people need to do that, especially when you're collection is so massive and you're like, we only have so many days out the year, and we know not every day is guaranteed. So like,
and we only have so many days in life, not to be like crazy about it, but like as you get older,
you never know.
It's not even the fact that I think of like blessed that I'm not like nothing's going to happen, but like you just realize it's like, I'm going to be 40 soon. And it's like, I have all these shoes, and it's like, you just realize I'm going through, and it's like, these shoes have been sitting here for 15 years in my closet, maybe it's time that I can get rid of stuff. And then when I start to get rid of stuff, I just feel better, because it's like my apartment's getting like inundated with like all these shoes, people are like, oh, it must be awesome. And I'm like, it is awesome to some extent, but also when your life starts to get just like, you feel like it's like a monster that's like growing in your room, and it's just like, now it's spread out into the kitchen in your bedroom, and you're like, no. Like this stuff's gotta,
we gotta minimize this. I mean, we gotta Marie Kondo some of this stuff.
Well, I feel like people get so hyped on collecting early on because they don't realize like what it's like to actually become a collector. And then it like borderline becomes hoarder. And then you're like, yeah, but when you're amassing the collection, it's fun. I remember when I first started amassing the collection, I was so hyped. But then when you have 150 pairs of sneakers, you're like, whoa, I need to like chill out, man.
Yeah, that I got to that moment. And then I also remember, I think it's like, I do want to say, because I was trying to think back to the moment where we were idolizing huge collections. And I don't know if it's like Mayer's collection, or if it's like, was it Fran Lation's collection early on or something like that? But I know, or even the Sneakerheads documentary, like it was always about just massive collections. It doesn't matter if like you had heat. It was like, it was always like you had to have a mixture of heat and the stuff, you get off of clearance. And then so we end up on, hundreds of pairs.
But I mean, like, it's almost like you're like worshiping the shoes at that point. And I feel like that's like really unhealthy. Like, I think it's really cool to like love shoes and appreciate. I always try to tell the stories behind them. And I always love the stories. But I think that that's the cool part about it, having shoes that you love, and like maybe getting your girlfriend or wife like a pair of shoes, or like I get excited about like Christmas time comes and I like buy my mom a pair of like 990 V6s and she's so hyped on having like a pair of like New Balances, you know, or I got my dad a pair of 993s and he was like super hyped on it, and like sharing the sneaker love with like other people and getting them to like love their shoes. Yeah. I just love that feeling. But I feel like when we make the sneaker collection like the idol, and then even to some extent, and I've had conversations with people about this where it's like they make the collector the idol too. Yeah. And it's like, not that you don't want a shoe collection, but you like look up to them like a little too much, like a little too much.
And you're like trying to get, now you've created a mountain. So now you're trying to get to them.
Yeah. And it's like, so I remember when I was in the Philippines recently, and that was an amazing experience because I told you I went through all that stuff with Foot Locker. Yeah. Thinking that my life sucks. I'm working at Foot Locker, and then it all kind of works out. And that's how I get the job at Complex. And then people knew that I worked at Foot Locker. So Foot Locker is celebrating their 50th anniversary. Yeah. So they want to invite me out to the Philippines to be like a guest speaker.
Yeah, that was so dope.
And I hit up, they had asked me about it because they're like, you're a striper. And then they were like, well, if Brendan wanted to come too, would he want to come? So I hit Brendan up, and then he came with me as well. And we're on stage in a mall in Manila.
Yeah, so dope.
Talking to people, and I'm like, dude, there's no way that all this stuff like randomly happened, because people hit me up and ask me, they're like, how do I get to do what you do? And I'm like, and not that I don't have advice for people, but I'm like, I don't know. Like I really don't know, because I never set out to do this. It just kind of like all like lined up and happened. Like I never set out to do full size run. I never even set out to be like a Complex sneaker editor. Yeah. It just kind of happened. So, but we were out there, and like people come up to me and they're like, bro, you're my idol. And I was like, no. And then like, as much as I'm appreciative of you telling me that, I'm not an idol. Yeah. I'm not someone to be like idolized or worshiped. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a man here who's made sneaker content, and I really appreciate you doing, loving it, but don't
idolize you.
Yeah. Don't idolize me. Like, try to go out and do things in your own life too, and like just make stuff. It's like, we have Instagram now. We didn't even have Instagram when I started, we're on MySpace. Yeah. Right. Like you see Nikki Diamonds on MySpace holding the Tiffany dunks up that goes all around Nike talk. And it's like, that's the stuff that I get excited about now, man, where it's like, I've been able to become friends with people like Nick Diamonds, and have them on the podcast. But then also like, I never thought like in that era, like just looking up to the Tiffany dunk, being like, this shoe is awesome, that like one day the guy who made the Tiffany dunk would be someone that we connected with in real life. I'm like, how did the roads lead to here?
I mean, I have no answers, but it's good to look back on that. I do have one last question as we end up and round out the podcast. I want you to think back to when you were younger and you're just about to open that box with the Aqua 8s in it. What would you tell your younger self as they open that box?
Man, you know what? I wouldn't tell myself anything, because I feel like if I told myself that like, hey, all of this stuff's going to end up happening to you, that I would probably start overthinking it too much. True. And I would be like, it wouldn't make sense to me, right? Like, you're a messenger from the future. Like, that meme where it's like the guy and the girl, where it's like,
and he turns back.
They both go back in time.
Oh,
like,
no, I don't know that one.
Oh, it's like, what would each sex tell their younger self or whatever if they could? But I don't know. I feel like it would wreck it for me if I would be like, hey, you're going to go on to do great things and da.
You just tap yourself on the shoulder.
I'd probably like in my head, I'd probably get full of myself. Yeah. Right. So I wouldn't want to tell myself anything. I would probably just tell yourself to enjoy it and see where it's going to go.
That's fire. Let everybody know where to find you.
Complex Sneaker Show. Used to be weekly. Now it's maybe every like 2 weeks. Yeah. Full size run. You can go watch the old episodes on YouTube. There's hundreds of them out there. Hundreds of episodes of the Complex Sneaker Show as well. We will be, I think we've made an official announcement, or maybe we have, I don't know. We'll be at Complex Con in Las Vegas.
Hopefully I am too as well.
Yes.
We'll see.
But we will be at Complex Con in Las Vegas doing something pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm really excited for, live and direct. So excited for that. And then.
Yeah. And you know where to find me. I am Who Is Haas on all social media. Follow the podcast at My First Kicks Pod. If you just are listening to this, go hit up the YouTube, My First Kicks on YouTube. Hit that like, subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications. And you know what we say every week? Wear your kicks. Peace.